Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast, where we discuss the world of film from a fresh angle. And now your host, Robert Yanis Jr.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast. This is Rob. On this show, we democratize the film criticism conversation by bringing on fans and critics alike to dig into their personal connection to a current or classic release. Normally, this week, we're going to be continuing our series following the Harry Potter films, and we're getting closer to the end. This week, we are talking about Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1, and I'm honored to welcome to the show Lyndsey Cole. Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So tell people a little bit about who you are, what you're up to, and then we'll start moving into the wizarding world.
Who I am? Well, I am an actor and an acting coach. And there's not a whole lot of that going on right now with COVID. But that's normally what I do, especially, stage work and musical theater. You could feel free to check out my website, www.lyndseycoleactor.com. So yeah, that's what I do. And it's a big reason why I love films. I love storytelling and I love acting, and there's a lot going on with Harry Potter. So
yeah, there is. And you're a longtime childhood friend of Kai, who's been on the show many times.
That is right. Kai is like my sister. We've known each other since we were toddlers, and our moms are good friends, and we've been roommates before. I just love her so much. She's family to me. And Rob, you're pretty cool too,
Oh, thanks. I will take it. Well, I'm glad that we were finally able to get you on here. I know we've been wanting to get you on the show for a while. So when I threw out that on Facebook that I was doing Harry Potter this year, I think you were pretty quick to grab Deathly Hallows Part 1. We'll get to why in a second. But first of all, when did you come across the Harry Potter, I'm assuming the book series first, and what's your experience with those as well as the films?
Okay, well, I actually watched the movie, the very first movie first. Yeah, I was in college, so it was a while ago. And I think at that point, only the first two movies had been made. And my younger stepsister, she was a big fan of the first movie and wanted me to watch it with her. And at the time I was kind of like, I'm going to be watching this children's movie. Okay. And then I thought it was really good. So then I decided I wanted to read the book. So then I actually started with Chamber of Secrets since I had already seen the first movie. And then I think at that point, the third and the fourth had also been written. So I went through Chamber of Secrets, Prisoner of Azkaban, and Goblet of Fire, like rapid pace. I just could not put them down. And then after I read those, I went back and read the first book. And then I watched the second movie, really liked it. And from then on, I was like pre-ordering my book whenever the new book would come out. I think there's one book where I went at midnight and bought it, but usually I would get up early the morning it came out, buy it, plow through it in like a day or two. And same with the movies. I'd always go to the midnight showing. So, I've been a fan of this franchise now for a long time. Yeah.
It feels like so long ago when we describe, because this movie came out, the one we're going to talk about this episode came out a decade ago. And it feels like a million years ago when we talk about people waited in line at bookstores to pick up physical copies of a book. First of all, people reading books. Let's talk about that one. And then, physical copies. Now everything is digital, and I feel like it makes us sound like dinosaurs when we talk. Oh, I remember when you waited at a Barnes and Noble or a Borders, and they're like, "What's Borders, Grandpa?" I'm like,
it's true. Oh my gosh, I know. Yeah, it was before I had a Kindle. It's so true. But it was so. I mean, and again, I'm going to sound really old, but there was such a festiveness about it. You know what I mean? Like you'd go to the bookstore, and like I'd see people dressed up in Harry Potter like merchandise, and you'd be like, "Oh, we're all getting our books." So I'm aging myself here, but I I think about it very fondly. I think we need more of that kind of book-related festivity.
Yeah, for sure. And because I remember when the movie came out, obviously, I saw the movies and then went back and read the books. Actually, Deathly Hallows is the only book I haven't read at all. I read the first 3 hardcover, and then I did the audiobooks for 4, 5, and 6, and then I never got to 7. I think because I was intimidated. It's like 24 or 27 discs, and by the time it came out, I was in a relationship and then running, had a house and then a kid, and so I never really gotten that. They don't really get that much time to actually focus and listen to a story. So that's something that I really need to rectify, just because it's the last one. It's the only one left. And I've tried to even started it a couple of times. But yeah, so I remember when the movie came out, the first movie, I was working at an AMC and there were adults coming to the concession stand, with the lightning bolt on their forehead and costume and all of that. And so that's kind of the way I discovered it too. I was like, okay, what is this? Everybody's excited about this movie. And then I was really impressed with that. And then my brother was really into it, and it became a whole thing from there. But yeah, I feel like there was more, and this is probably because it was pre-social media, there was more purity to the fandom back then. Now, every time something comes out, just as many people hate it as love it, it seems.
True. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
So I feel like Harry Potter might have been one of the last ones that kind of slipped in there and ended a franchise before everyone was on, everyone was really on Twitter. I feel like Twitter launched like 2007, probably around this time, a year or so, give or take a year, was when Twitter was really blowing up. I think I joined in like 2009, possibly. And Harry Potter kind of slipped through before everyone was hashtagging their thoughts about everything they had seen. And yeah, it's really crazy how the culture has moved so fast in the last decade.
Yeah. So, I mean, social media has just sped everything up too,
Mm-hmm.
So it's crazy.
Yeah.
It was a simpler time.
Oh God, I know. Well, this is obviously behind the scenes, but we're recording this the day before the election. So tensions are high on the side of the call, on both sides of the call. But yes, so the fact that this series is about sort of an uprising of like an evil regime, I've been calling them magic Nazis on the podcast, the parallels are very potent, especially, starting with Order of the Phoenix, where there's all this misinformation. And it's sort of, Voldemort is back, and the Ministry is trying to, in denial and trying to keep it under wraps. And there's like this underground movement where the kids are going to save everyone, basically. So there's a lot of that going on. That in mind, is there a specific reason why you wanted to talk about Deathly Hallows Part 1, and how do you sort of rank the series?
How do I rank the series? Okay, well, I can definitely say Deathly Hallows is my favorite of the books, and both films are my favorite of the films. I'm a sucker for for darkness, for tragedy and drama. And so, that's one of the things I like about the books, about how they get progressively darker as you go, and the films literally do. And then I like Part 1, I think, even a little more than Part 2, because Part 2 is great because it has so much action. But I like that Part 1 is where everything's kind of simmering beneath the surface. You know what I mean? It kind of almost, so much of the conflict comes from Ron and Hermione and Harry, and all of this uncertainty they're facing in terms of like, they don't even know how to begin to find these Horcruxes. They don't know how to destroy them, and how, they all, especially Ron and Harry, kind of like turn on each other. Especially with the Locket's influence and all of that. So I really like that. It's one of the reasons why I'm an actor. I really like psychology, and I really like the way people can get under other people's skin and create tension and drama. I find that fascinating. So that's probably why that's my favorite. And then in terms of ranking, it's funny, when I first read them, Prisoner of Azkaban was my favorite. But now, being older and having seen the movies so many times, having reread the series several times. I would just go backwards, literally. Like 7 is my favorite, back to 1 being my least favorite. The 1 is a very sweet story. That is the most, that's the most like children's literature to me. And the message is really heartwarming and beautiful, but give me the darkness and the drama. So actually, you know what? So it'd be 6, 7, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very stark contrast, the first one to the last one. Like,
right.
Or let's say this is because this is the first part of the last one. Let's say from Sorcerer's Stone to here, because Kai and I, our daughter is almost 4. I feel like the first movie is the only one I would even consider showing her for a while, just because it's just like you said, there's so much awe and wonder to the first one. It has I sort of likened it to sort of a Wizard of Oz quality when I first saw it, because there's the moment where Hagrid taps on the bricks and it opens up, revealing Diagon Alley, and it's very much stepping into another world sort of deal. And this one is just like that whole world it's like if the first one is Wizard of Oz, this is Return to Oz, where there's electrotherapy and like terrifying severed heads screaming at you, and like it's just it doesn't even feel like the same franchise in a way.
That's a great parallel.
And I think I've sort of mentioned this in previous episodes, but it feels to me that the metaphor there is, the whole thing is a coming of age story. So it starts out when you're young and everything is discovery and blah, blah, blah. And as it goes on, things get more complicated. You realize the authority figures in your life aren't exactly who you thought they were.
Right.
You sort of have to step into your own. And that's sort of the stripping away of Harry's, mentors. First Sirius, then Dumbledore, then basically everyone else. And it's by the end, he's a man and he makes the decision to face Voldemort himself in the Forbidden Forest. So I think it's really fascinating the way that it kind of mirrors the adolescence, the period of adolescence from childhood to adulthood. But I feel like we're kind of already leaning into the movie. So let's listen to a little bit of the trailer for Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1 right now.
We have infiltrated the Ministry.
You have nothing to fear if you have nothing to hide.
The longer we stay here, the stronger he gets.
I must be the one to kill Harry Potter.
We need to get off the streets, get somewhere safe.
Let's say we get undercover before someone murders him.
That way they won't know which Harry Potter is the real one.
They are coming. They are coming.
Nobody else is gonna die. Not for me. We have to do something. You think I don't know how this feels? You don't know how it feels! Your parents are dead. You have no family.
He's after you, Mr. Potter. Tell me where he is. You really don't stand a chance.
I got him! Help me!
That was a little bit of the trailer for Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1 from 2010, directed by David Yates. Do you think that this franchise benefits from the fact that they had the same director from Order of the Phoenix, Half-Blood Prince, these two, and then I believe he's still doing all the Fantastic Beasts, actually?
Yes, I really like his direction because you know what? Because who did the third one? Was that Alfonso Cuarón?
That was, yeah.
I was not a fan of his direction.
Really?
And it actually,
Hot take.
I know,
Lyndsey.
I know. I was surprised. I thought I would really like it. And when I saw it, I did not like it. And it was a shame for me because, like I said, for a while, that book was my favorite of the books.
Right.
And then, Chris Columbus, I think he's great for those first two movies because he's really great at bringing in that kind of like childhood wonder that you were just talking about. So I thought after Cuarón, I feel like they found a really solid director in terms of where the films needed to go. So I was really glad that they stuck with him.
I like Prisoner of Azkaban. I think Cuarón's a great filmmaker. I can see how that would kind of throw you off because he does lean into the whimsy pretty hard. He does. It feels very much like a Tim Burton-y aesthetic, which maybe isn't necessarily the way that you see the Harry Potter universe.
Well, I felt like it distracted from the story. I felt like I was noticing his direction, and it was actually taking me out of the story, as opposed to it seamlessly lifting the story. You know what I mean?
Right. It was more Cuarón doing his own thing instead of making a Harry Potter movie.
Yeah. That was how I felt.
Okay, fair enough.
But he was great on The Little Princess. So
yeah, that's a good movie.
Little Princess. It is a good movie.
So I think the most obvious question with Deathly Hallows is, do you think this should have been cut into 2 movies? Is there any way they could have made this work otherwise? Because this was the first of many sort of YA adaptations that, Twilight, Hunger Games, Divergent, I think, did that and then never even bothered with the last one.
They were so bad.
I didn't bother with those, but pretty much all of them tried to do the same thing. I think to much poorer results. I think this, in my opinion, it's kind of more warranted here. But where do you stand on that?
I'm glad they did it. I feel like there would have been so much valuable stuff that would have been cut out. And I think they did a really effective job with making it like a cliffhanger at the end of part 1. I saw it in theaters. And at the end, I was like, yeah, can't wait for the next one. So yeah, I think it serves the story really well. I like that choice. What about you?
I think it works. And I think it works because so many of the other novels have that, that's the subplot that's not really relevant. The one I tend to go back to is I forget in which one it is. I think it might be Goblet of Fire, or where Hermione's trying to free the house elves. Like it has nothing to do with the title mystery of the movie. It's just kind of a world building. By the way, this is also happening in the background kind of thing.
Right.
And all of them have that to some extent. I think a lot of people criticize Half-Blood Prince for cutting out, and because Kai actually was on that episode and she talked about how she thinks it's a much better book than a movie because they streamlined pretty heavily all the young Tom Riddle stuff.
Yes,
and cut a lot of it out in favor of, love triangles and potions and stuff like that.
Right. No, I was disappointed about that with the 6th film as well, because I thought that was some of my favorite stuff in that book was the Tom Riddle and his mother. I thought all of that was really interesting and sad. But, like I said, I really like psychology. So I loved finding out all of the details about why Voldemort was who he was.
Yeah, it's a little bit like, what was that? Hannibal Rising, where it's like, whoa, this is how he got to be this way. Scary. But yeah, so I think in Deathly Hallows, you don't really have there's no B story to be cut. It's all 100% focused on the Horcruxes and sort of wrapping things up and tying together, the previous 6 chapters. So I think, and I think it works here because of that. And the 2 movies are still very different. I think you can feel David Yates' contrasting style just from these movies to the previous ones, but also between these 2 different movies, because the way I sort of see it is kind of like the Kill Bill movies, if you've seen those. That
it's been a while.
The first one is like all action. It's a revenge. It's like, super violent, and it's just her, Uma Thurman kicking ass basically for 2 hours. And then the next one, it slows down, and like the big climax is her and Bill having a conversation and a very short sword fight. I feel like it's sort of flipped with the Harry Potter movies, that this is the quiet, more reflective, more character-based one. And then the next one's basically a 2-hour climax.
I mean, that's how the book is laid out. I think she wanted a lot of build, because when you're investing yourself, I mean, that's the thing. It could maybe work better with something like Kill Bill, where it's just, 2 volumes or whatever, where this has been building up for 7 books, you know what I mean? So like, It seems like it should all culminate in something really huge at the end. So I think it makes sense that the second movie would kind of have this really huge, action heavy, high stakes plot stuff going on, while the first half of that is still getting you there.
Right.
Yeah.
And they established the stakes right up front here. We have, the minister talking about how the ministry is strong and not so much. And I feel like for the first time, we finally see inside the lion's den. Like, this is the first time we actually get to kind of spend time with Voldemort and the Death Eaters in their lair. What was that? How do you think that contributes to making this feel like the sort of epic conclusion to the saga?
Well, it's kind of funny. It's almost like a parallel of how, nobody for so much of the franchise, no one's willing to say Voldemort's name, or, few people are willing to say it. And so it's almost like we were meant to keep him at arm's length, you know what I mean? In general. And so it's like by the seventh book, it's like I feel like it's a little bit of foreshadowing in that, no, we're going to get to know this man intimately. We're going to be right up there. And it's like there's no hiding anymore. There's no avoiding this man. There's no saying his name does not matter anymore. We're going right up into his space, where he is, where these atrocities are being committed. I mean, that scene is it's so sad with the Muggle studies teacher, what they're doing to her, and she's just so pathetic, pleading for Snape to help her. It's just a really effective way of bringing us into his orb and reacquainting ourselves with the depth of his cruelty.
It's also, considering he is such the primary villain of this franchise and such a dramatic force, how little really until this movie you get of Voldemort at all. I mean, in 1, he's on the back of a dude's head. In 2, he's a memory in a book. 3, he's not in at all. 4, he shows up at the end. 5, again at the end. 6, it's like just flashbacks. And so you barely get a glimpse into what he's up to now until here. And then I feel like Half-Blood Prince is obviously the setup for the big conclusion, with the Horcruxes being introduced and also letting us know what his upbringing was, so that when we get to this moment, when we get to this 2-part finale, it feels like Voldemort and Harry are more on even footing, because we understand the depths of both of their stories a little more completely.
True. Yeah. No, I remember being surprised that Ralph Fiennes was playing it when I saw Goblet of Fire, because I was like, this is like, I mean, he's the villain, but gosh, you barely really see him in this movie. And Ralph Fiennes is such a big deal, such a, internationally renowned actor. But I guess he maybe JK told him, don't worry, I'm going to give you some more meaty stuff by the end. I don't know.
Yeah. And go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, which, by the way, I've heard not nice things about Ralph Fiennes as a human being.
Really?
Yeah. I worked with a woman who did hair for him and on a film he did. And, she said he was like a huge diva, that the crew was ordered to not speak with him or make eye contact with him. Like, he's one of those actors.
So he might not have even known the cameras were rolling in this movie, is what you're saying. Just
right. I know. There's a reason why he's
like,
so.
Wow.
Yeah.
He feels so authentic
when I heard that, because he's so talented. And whenever I hear that about talented actors, I'm like, man, now I can't like you as much anymore.
Right. Well, I mean, that's sort of been what's going on with me last few months, especially with J.K. Rowling, with everything going on about her. That's why at least the last couple episodes, I'm basically trying to not talk about the person that created these, because it's like separating the art from the artist. And I had guests lined up for the last episode that ended up not wanting to do it, because she's like, I can't really talk about this right now. She's like, she has a friend who's non-binary, and it's, the whole thing just feels really close to home. So it's very awkward now that Harry Potter fans, so many of them, are having to turn their back on J.K. Rowling in the midst of all this. But
I know. It's just, even watching this movie, and when they go into the Ministry of Magic and And there's that moment where Hermione sees the statue in the middle of that lobby area of the muggles being crushed underfoot of the wizards. And, she says something like, oh, it's the muggles in their rightful place. That's where they think we should, muggles should be or something. And I was just thinking, like, I can't even wrap my head around the cognitive dissonance required for J.K. Rowling to put all of this like anti-prejudicial like thought into her work, to have all of these messages. I mean, the whole first book is about how love triumphs over fear. You know what I mean? Because that's Voldemort functions out of fear and hate, and Harry functions out of love. And I'm like, can't you see how hypocritical you are? Like, can't you see that you have a major blinders are regarding the trans community, that what you should be doing is responding with love? Like, I can't wrap my brain around it. It's so crazy to me. It's so disappointing. It's so disappointing.
I made a note for part 2 of this, where there's the scene where Dumbledore and Harry are in Harry's mind or wherever, and he says something. He says, "Don't pity the dead, pity the living, and above all, those who live without love." And I wrote in my notes, "JK," because it's like, Jesus.
No, that's the thing that I said to Mike, to my husband, Mike. I was like, it's so funny that her name is JK, because it's like, JK, I'm not a good person.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like, I can't. I know it's very disappointing. And now, her work is very confusing to consume because of it.
Right. But yeah, it's good that we at least acknowledge her. That way people listening are like, well, what about the whole thing with J.K. Rowling? I'm like, we know, we're aware.
Yeah.
We're focusing on the work and not the person behind it, because, got to get through the end of this franchise at least. Right. That's the thing that happened in the I know she's made comments and stuff over periodically over time, but this whole really crystallized while I was in the middle of this franchise. So now I'm like, shit, I need to get through this now and move on to the next, because the whole thing's gotten really uncomfortable. It's become very ill-timed, but yes, Ralph Fiennes is great as Voldemort, and seems like he's having the time of his life. And now that you said that, I understand why a little bit more.
Yeah. And you know what? Maybe he's not a prejudicial jerk against entire communities. So, if that's the case, he at least, is doing better than J.K. Rowling, I guess.
That's true. Very true. Very true.
I will say Daniel Radcliffe is supposed to be very, very nice. I have heard just wonderful stories about him.
That's good. That's good. We'll take that at least. I remember I saw a tweet months ago that stuck in my head. It's like, it's amazing that Daniel Radcliffe was able to write and star in the Harry Potter movies. People are just like, let's rewrite history and focus on him. Because and considering the whatever billions of dollars he's worth or was worth with these movies, it's like he seems pretty grounded. Weirdly, like you would think someone. The most famous, he was, I think at one point he was the richest British child other than the princes, basically.
Wow.
And you would think that would really go to his head, but he didn't even seem to have that much of a sort of Justin Bieber like acting out phase. He struggled with addiction issues. He did. I remember hearing about that, but it wasn't like a public thing really so much, it seems.
No, it wasn't. I think, it was very hidden, but I know he said he was a drunk for a lot of those later movies. But I saw him do How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying on Broadway. And he was really wonderful. And I have some friends who worked that show. And one of my friends, she was the bartender in the lobby. And she said she used to hang out with him in the alley during intermission while he was smoking cigarettes. And he was so nice. And he, for some reason, is really interested in American history. And my friend is as well. So they would talk about American history. My friend loves Polk, is her favorite president for whatever reason. Okay. I don't really know enough about presidents to say if that's cool or not. But he bought her a book on Polk. Like and I just heard such nice things about him. So just so down to earth and nice. So yay him.
Yeah,
I'm glad he
seriously.
overcame his addiction issues. I'm glad he still works. I think he's talented too. Like I said, he was really good in the show. I thought it was well cast. So I love to see him in these movies. And I'm so glad he wrote these books.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Daniel. I'm glad that to hear that. That's always nice to learn that such famous people are not garbage people. But
Right.
I think to that, I feel like that's sort of weirdly a transition into the big questionable garbage person of this franchise, which is Snape, who up to this point, so you had read the books up to this point when this came out, I'm assuming, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So I knew all of it.
Okay.
Before I saw the film.
Okay, so and I guess then when you finished Half-Blood Prince and before you had read Deathly Hallows, where were you on Snape? Because I know that was the big marketing thing for Deathly Hallows. Like, Snape, is he good? Is he evil? What's going on? Like, where did you sort of land on that?
Gosh, to be honest, it's a little hard to remember. It was so long ago.
Do you think that the movies do a credible job kind of raising that question so that there's an argument for both sides? How about that?
I do. Yeah. Especially, I mean, in that scene that I just mentioned earlier with that Muggle studies teacher, he just sits there. Well, they torture her and kill her. So I think that's a really solid mislead, that they do to cast further doubt about his allegiance. Yeah, I think I just felt confused. I mean, I was so horrified when Dumbledore died in the 6th book. So I was so sad and I was so shocked and surprised. And so for Snape, to have been involved in that way, I was just horrified. But I can't remember what opinion I had either way. I think I just couldn't wait to find out.
This is definitely the story where everybody is sort of facing, paying the price for their decisions. So Snape, as we find out in the next one, was, sort of agreed to be a double agent protecting Harry until he could face Voldemort and all of that. And so, that moment that you just mentioned in the beginning of the movie, it's like, it's him, how he has to now live with all the things that he's had to let happen. And I think that sort of feeds into what Harry says in the epilogue of the next one, where he's like, one of the headmasters of Hogwarts that you're named after, talking to his son Albus Severus Potter, was a Slytherin and the bravest man I ever knew. And because he had to live with this for so many years, kind of playing both sides and keeping his true allegiance hidden and letting the world think he was this terrible person, all in service of, playing basically the end game, essentially, and kind of keeping that card up their sleeves until the very last moment.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's interesting with Snape because he's such a controversial character. I've seen and read a lot of especially women who think we shouldn't be praising Snape as some sort of hero, when he was weirdly stalkery about Lily and then continued to bully her son, because he was so petty about his dad or, cause it's oh, well, he did this stuff, but really he was nursing this stalker, love for his mother and then treating Harry terribly. And I kind of see that point. But I don't know. I just have a lot of empathy for him. And I think that maybe I'm giving him too much credit, but I feel like he wanted to be kind to Harry and, but there was just too much about him that was similar to James, and James bullied him. And I think it was really triggering for Snape's own trauma to have to look after somebody who so resembled and took after Snape's former tormentor. Snape obviously had such low self-esteem, and I don't think the death of Lily helped that. I mean, I think that's partly why he was able to do all of that sacrificial stuff. was because I feel like he, on some level, felt that he deserved to be punished for being responsible for her death. Oh, I've also heard people say that they thought it was creepy that he just wanted to like look at Harry's eyes while he was dying. Like, but I don't know. Maybe I'm still too much of some kind of romantic, or maybe it's my own internalized patriarchy or some shit. I don't know. But I think maybe some of the stuff that wasn't great was worth it if it meant he saved the world. I guess. I don't know what I'm excusing, but yeah, no. I have empathy for him, and I think he's multifaceted.
I do too. And this, he's not even in this one that much. It's really in the second one,
True.
In the next part where we kind of learn the depth of his story. But, I'll admit it. I watched Deathly Hallows Part 2 last night. I cried at his death scene and in his montage when it happens, because you do see the fact that there's sort of an argument, I think, at least in the movies, for the fact that he and Lily had a friendship, and then James kind of came along and stole and disrupted that and belittled him, and sort of, in his eyes, took Lily away from him. There's also the reveal in that epic montage of Snape's memories, where he sends the Patronus, which is the same one that matches Lily. So it kind of implies that they really kind of were meant to be together in a way. That there was some connection there that was disrupted by James Potter. And I think Harry's sort of realization, he gets a little bit of that in Order of the Phoenix with the occlumency lessons with Snape, that his father wasn't the perfect person either, that all these adults aren't classified as good or bad. Even the Malfoys in this, and this is sort of a perfect transition. The Malfoys are pathetic characters in these last two movies. They're trapped with the magic Nazis, which I'm going to stick to that. They put their all their chips on Voldemort, and now they're sort of again paying the price for that decision. They're suffering, and they're outcast from their place within the legitimate wizarding world, and now they're just kind of trapped as Voldemort's lackeys. Basically, they have no choice in what they're doing. They're not really obviously behind the cause anymore. How do you feel about the way that the movies take the Malfoys? I guess particularly Draco, who lets Harry get by, like slip right past Bellatrix Lestrange by the end of this one.
I think it's perfect. I think it's brilliant because it's so true. It's one of the ways that, art really reflects life, because people are always, a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but hateful people are always jumping the gun to take the freedoms away from other people until they realize it's at the expense of their own freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what that is. They, they think that they can take freedom away from muggles and witches and wizards of mixed heritage. They think that they can take those freedoms away and still live in some kind of like free, happy society, but it never works that way. Because if you're following a bully that's willing to bully others, eventually you're going to be bullied as well. It's just what happens. Bullies bully. Doesn't matter who you are. They don't really care for anyone but themselves. So I think that illustrates that really perfectly.
Yeah, I love the fact that in a way, I feel like the Malfoys sort of end up being Harry's kind of ultimate allies. Like out of nowhere, because Kai and I have been watching a lot. We just watched Cobra Kai, so on the Half-Blood Prince episode, I kept referring to Draco Malfoy as Harry's Johnny Lawrence, basically. They're like, the first few movies are like them on the Quidditch field, kind of competing.
Right,
who's gonna
the blonde
get
and the brunette.
Yeah, exactly. And in Half-Blood Prince reveals just how conflicted Draco is, and then here they sort of are I guess. In the way that Snape is, they're trapped within that world, and they're also they also kind of have Harry's back. You have Draco here who lets him pass, and then in the next one, Narcissa, who lies to Voldemort that Harry is dead, again, letting Harry sort of get the upper hand and turn things around. And I really, I like that in this battle against Voldemort, the Malfoys kind of become allies to Harry Potter and see the error of their ways, to the point where, like, the last time you see the Lucius is just him like turning back and booking it as fast as he can. And I love that that's sort of where they end up, that they think they're the, you know, the badass like villain of the story, but they're not really. They're just as much a victim as anybody else, like you were saying.
Yes. Well, and I love too the way it really starts. You see it foreshadowed in the sixth movie and book, you know, because there's all of this description, and you see it in the movie of Draco becoming more worn looking and nervous. You know, he really doesn't want the responsibility of killing somebody, especially Dumbledore. You know, and he can't do it in the end. He's not a killer. He's a spineless coward, and there's a part of him that loved Hogwarts, and you know, like, so you see it start to happen. So it's really great that then you see his whole family turns that way as well. You see their uncertainty, and finally their self-preservation kicks in, and they're like, we have to get out of here. Like,
not worth it.
Not worth it.
I'm cashing out, pushing all their chips towards Voldemort. And like, we're going home. This isn't. Yeah, right. We don't want any part of your like little magic Holocaust, I guess.
Yeah. Oh.
I mean, that's what it is. That's the whole thing.
Is.
I mean,
no,
that's what's so great about sci-fi, fantasy, horror, all these genres, is that you can have, this is a movie essentially about a Nazi Holocaust, but it's magic. Yeah. So take your kids. It's all good. But that's essentially what the story is. It's genocide, basically. Yeah. And it's, I think that's what makes this kind of storytelling so powerful, is that you're able to put those important messages and parallels under the guise of metaphor and make it more palatable to people who wouldn't go to see, you know, a movie about the actual Holocaust. But if it's wizards, then yeah, that's okay. Don't worry about it. It's
right,
it's a lot safer, I guess.
Yeah, it's your medicine with a spoonful of sugar.
Right, exactly. Well, like I said before we started the call, I just posted the Hamilton episode. I can't talk. And it's hip hop history. It's like I learned more about American history through that than I did in the public school system here in Florida. So it's like I feel like there's a lot to that, and I think you know, fantasy does such a great job with this. I also wanted to point out, just early on, we get a lot I was talking about sort of the stark contrast between the earlier stories. We get the Dursleys again, kind of piecing out. Hermione has to turn her back on her parents and erase their memory. So like, yes. Again, really starting out with like the stakes and the weight and the sacrifice that both sides that everyone's trying to make just to survive in this sort of Voldemort's reign of terror. Speak to some of that, because I you know, we open with the Dursleys packing up and leaving, the Granger's memory erased, and then, you know, we sort of, even then we have an action sequence. But I think to me, the thing that really lets viewers know that this 2-part finale really means business is not only does Mad Eye die off screen, but Hedwig gets killed.
Hedwig gets me every time. Oh my gosh. I'm a sucker if an animal dies in a movie. So like, and the fact that she sacrifices herself for Harry, like she thinks he's in trouble and like swoops in front of him and basically like takes a bullet, you know, a wand bullet. And, you know, and she, like, to think this like small, fluffy, snowy owl, like, you know, who would have no shot against a wizard with a wand is like giving herself for this boy. It just crushes me. It like lets you know, it's like Game of Thrones. You know, it's like letting you know, like, anybody can die in this. And and with Hermione's parents, I was like, I hadn't really thought about it before. I was like, so Obliviate is permanent. Like, I guess part of me always thought like, oh, I'm sure once it was all over, she like gave them their memories back. And, you know, when she's like an adult married to Ron and stuff, like they're back in her life. But watching it, I was like, no, that they obliviate never, like they can never undo obliviate. Like people are always like, just go on with their lives, it seems like. And yeah, the depth of that sacrifice. Oh man, that's crazy. It's heartbreaking, but it, you know, they all knew it was serious, that this was an end of the world genocidal situation, you know, and desperate times, as much as it's a cliche, desperate times do call for desperate measures.
I also love that once they do go out into the Muggle world, obviously they survive the attack in transferring Harry to the safe house, but some people don't. But the main three do. Then they have a wedding with Fleur and Bill, and so it's the conversation of how these are dark times, and they're trying to have a wedding going on, and how, you know, maybe that actually is important to continue and have some kind of lightness. And in 2020, I was feeling all of that. I mean, in a much lesser extent, but feeling all of that, like feeling like you're in a dark time and being like, well, let's find, you know, the silver linings. What is not so bad about being in a pandemic in this current, you know, this current administration and all of that. And I feel like I feel that circumstance to some degree. But I love the fact that when they do, you know, the attack happens, the minister is killed, and they just take off the main trio, not knowing what's going on, who survived, who's dead, out into the Muggle world. I feel like for the very first time, we see all three of them out in the Muggle world in, you know, regular clothes. And Hermione, of course, is the most capable, because she's the only one that is fully entrenched in both the wizarding and the Muggle worlds. And I love the fact that because of that, it kind of in a way makes her the most badass, because she's so well-rounded and she can kind of handle herself equally in both worlds.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, that's true. Because I forget that, because Harry is of both worlds, but he was so often kind of left in that house and under the stairs or whatever, you know, where her parents obviously cared for her and took her out and about, and she really lived in there. Yeah, I actually love that scene when they're in the Muggle world and they go to that little counter shop, that little diner, and Hermione orders a cappuccino, and the other two are just like, yeah, what she said.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, they don't know what that is.
and to my earlier point about how this is sort of a parable about adolescence, this is like them finding themselves in the world for the first time. It's like, they're out of their parents' house, they're out, you know, they're getting their first apartment. Well, what am I supposed to do now? What is it like to be an adult? It's kind of that, they're kind of thrust into it out of nowhere. And then this movie really focuses on the three of them on their own, trying to figure out what to do next and how to go about getting the Horcruxes. We spend, I would say, roughly half the movie, it feels like, in the woods with our three main characters, just trying to figure out their next move, basically.
Yes, no, that's kind of what I was saying earlier, is that's one of the things I love about this is how big of a presence uncertainty has. Because I know I'm somebody who I can be kind of a control freak, I guess. I try not to be. But, you know, when things feel especially uncertain, I'm so much more likely to be dealing with a lot more anxiety. And that's one of the things that's so anxiety inducing about the pandemic right now, is all of the uncertainty that exists, you know, like when are things going to be normal again? Will there ever be a normal again? How, you know, the election, like what's going to happen? Who's going to win? Whoever does win, how is that going to play out, you know, in terms of social unrest? Like there's just so much uncertainty. And that's almost scarier than knowing the bad thing that's going to happen.
Yep.
Because at least when you know what the villain is, you know what the goal is, you know the steps to take, the path to follow, as scary as it might be, you at least have a plan, which makes you feel somewhat competent. But when you're just floating around completely uncertain with no instruction manual, you know, that's terrifying. And I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, you're so right. That is such a parallel to when you first really enter adulthood And I mean, when I graduated from college, I like immediately moved to New York to try to be an actor. And I was like, you know, sleeping on an air mattress in a tiny apartment I had found. And I had like no furniture and was like trying to find a job and like living on barely any money. And all of that uncertainty was terrifying. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. This is my first time living as an adult and I'm doing it completely on my own. And it's a lot, you know. It ended up working out well, but you know, so that's certainly the place they're in. They're just hanging out in the woods, not knowing what to do, which is one of the things that Ron keeps really struggling with, I think, the most of all of them, you know, and he takes it out on Harry, because usually Harry and Hermione have a plan. One of them has a plan. Harry's the man of action. Hermione's the woman of intellect, you know, so between the two of them, there's usually a lot more of a game plan going on. And this is kind of the first time where they're all kind of scrambling all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And even their normal tactics don't really solve the problem. I mean, in here, you know, we kind of skipped over, there's the wedding and then there's the ministry sort of infiltration where they confront with Umbridge, and there's again more polyjuice fun. More fun with polyjuice potion, which is like the third or fourth time. I think even in the next one, they use polyjuice again to get into Gringotts. It's like, that's their thing. They're like, all right, there's a mystery. We have to get a thing. We just do some polyjuice and then it all works out, right? and even then it doesn't work and they barely escape. You know, Harry gets to throw the I mustn't tell lies thing back in Umbridge's face again, which is great. And then Ron gets injured on the way out. And I feel like it's the first time we really see blood in a Harry Potter movie. I mean, because Hermione has it on her hands. She's like tending to his wound, trying to heal it with magic. And it's where you really get... Yeah,
you see his like skinned muscle. It's pretty graphic.
It's like I think they say he got splinched or something. They say
splinched. Yeah.
It's like the first time you realize, oh shit, this is not a kid's movie. This is like kind of terrifying that these children are up against these epic forces of evil, and they might not get out of here. They killed the owl. Anything can happen.
Right.
So I really appreciate the fact that the movie tests those characters in that way. And, you know, Dumbledore was helpful, but, you know, he just showed up and was like, here's a riddle, figure it out. Right. And he didn't really tell you what to do. And as this movie and the next one really point out, Harry didn't really know Dumbledore kind of at all.
Yeah.
Dumbledore was obviously, we find out in the next one, his mission is keep Harry alive until hopefully we can figure out how to take care of Voldemort. But yeah, so he doesn't really open up to Harry in the way that I think Harry thought that he had been.
Yeah. Well, it's just also, it's that kind of realization, which you said basically earlier, you know, that your parents haven't had an identity before they were your parents. And it's like Dumbledore was a person before he was a grandfatherly old school mentor, you know, like, and a lot of kids are shocked to find that out, you know, when they start to look at pictures of their parents when they were younger and be like, whoa, you used to have a motorcycle, or, you know, whatever. I don't know. That's my first example, but yeah, it's, you know, it's kind of jolting. Or when you find out, it's like when you find out when you're a kid that your teacher has a life outside of school, you know, like,
yeah,
like,
exactly.
It's always kind of shocking. Yeah.
Yeah. There was before he was Dumbledore, he was Jude Law, apparently, if we're going by the new movies, which while I'm on the topic, have you seen either of the Fantastic Beasts movies, or do you care?
I saw the first one and I thought it was meh. But I was willing to see the second one if I heard good things. And then I heard the second one was so bad and boring that I did not bother to see it.
Okay. Yeah. I kind of assumed that because I feel like that's generally the reaction to the Fantastic Beasts movies.
Yeah.
In fact, I kind of wonder why they even bother at this point. They're just continuing because...
They're going to make another one?
Yeah. Yeah, they're supposed to. They had planned 5, they said. And I'm just like, please don't bother. Nobody cares. Like literally all the Harry Potter fans, I mean, I think they did okay the last one, but nobody's passionate about these movies. They're just kind of, I mean, they're just kind of there. You add now the kind of stink on J.K. Rowling with the already existing stink on Johnny Depp, who is Grindelwald.
Yeah.
Like, everybody's gonna feel icky walking into the theater. It's just, I don't know. I feel like that was a bad call to try and drag that out so much, but it's not a terrible idea to try and make more stories in this world. I just feel like they're going about it completely the wrong way. But yeah, that's just what we've seen of Dumbledore to date, and it feels like that it's not really working out for them. What are your thoughts on all the callbacks that are in this movie? Because there are a lot of them. I mean, first of all, I feel like this an alternate title could have been called Harry Potter and the Magical Artifacts, because he's just constantly hunting down like the sword of Godric Gryffindor, like this,
right.
This cup, and like this locket and this diadem in the next one, and like
right.
It's just like chasing down magical stuff. But in here we get not only that, we get the snitch that's left to him by Dumbledore. Ron gets the Deluminator, which is probably my favorite callback because it's such a little detail in the very beginning of the very first movie. Is there a specific callback or reappearance by a character from the previous installment that you really love?
Honestly, I mean, not in this movie, but I do like the whole thing with the diadem, the crown. I find that background, that it's Ravenclaw, right? I thought that background was really interesting, and I really liked that character, that ghost. And I love the actress too. I can't remember her name, but it's the woman from Boardwalk Empire, and I just think she's a really wonderful actor.
Kelly MacDonald, I believe, because I looked it up too, because I was like, who is that? She looks so familiar. But it's Kelly MacDonald.
It was funny because I hadn't seen the movies in a while, and then I watched Boardwalk, and then I was watching the movie, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's Peggy. Because I just think she's really fantastic in Boardwalk Empire. So yeah, I like getting, as much as I like the throwbacks to things we had seen in the past, like the snitch and things like that, I really liked getting more history on these historical figures. Because I also think too, it's kind of sending the message about how much history matters. You know what I mean? How the past is never really dead. It's because it informs the present, you know? So yeah, I think it's great how all of that was tied in, but that would probably be my favorite. I liked it. It's not in the film, but in the movie, and I think it's the second half because it's about the cup, the chalice. I like the whole part of the story where they, or maybe I'm mixing up which book it might be in, but where they show the whole thing about how Tom Riddle gets it from this like woman, from this descendant of Hufflepuff, and she's like this wealthy woman, and he's kind of like, you know, schmoozing her to get it. I wish I could remember, but I remembered really liking that bit of history in the book, and it wasn't in the film, and I was disappointed that they had cut it because I really like a lot of that historical context.
Yeah, these last two really feel like they're trying to split the difference as much as possible with acknowledging all the lore and the history, as you're saying. I mean, with the four houses that, you know, as I said, Godric Gryffindor comes up, Ravenclaw comes up, like all the different, you know, Slytherin, obviously we talked about earlier in the series, they had, you know, the era of Slytherin is the whole thing with the Chamber of Secrets.
Right.
So it tries to balance all of this history that the main characters and the viewers didn't know, with all these callbacks, where it's basically sort of a Harry Potter greatest hits in a way. And it kind of it feels like this is now, and I wonder now if Harry Potter was the franchise to really popularize this, but it feels like this two-part story, as well as The Rise of Skywalker, as well as Avengers Endgame, all have sort of a fetch quest, to use, I guess, a video game term. I'm not even a gamer for like the longest time, but I really like that terminology, where the heroes are just chasing MacGuffins all over the place, often that tie back to either a history that they're learning about or previous movies. And I feel like Harry Potter may have been the sort of modern pioneer in that regard, because now I feel like audiences are expecting in order for something to provide a satisfying conclusion, to go and revisit and remind, like, remember Umbridge? Remember the Chamber of Secrets? Remember the Snitch?
Right.
And kind of like refresh your memory and tie in all these elements. I mean, Dobby shows up in this, and briefly, unfortunately, which we'll get to.
Oh, gosh, Dobby.
Dobby shows up in this for the first time since the second film. Ollivander shows up in, like, it's like deep cuts that come back in this movie and obviously the next one. And I think that I feel like that this franchise really sort of shaped that's now the perception as what qualifies a sort of epic franchise ender.
That's a great observation. Like, I've never really thought about that. Yeah, you're totally right. No, and I love it when that stuff is in movies. I don't know that I can articulate why, though.
It's that familiarity. It's why, you know,
the nostalgia, familiarity.
Yeah, even as if there's better coffee places around, a lot of times I'll just be like, well, Starbucks, I know what to expect there. That's fine. It's sort of, it's dependable. It's familiar. It's so, you know, you have all these warm feelings tied to it. So I feel like, and this movie also, more so than any of the other ones, really assumes the viewer's knowledge of the lore and what's happening. Like, there's zero hand holding here. They just jump right in and they're like, we need to get those Horcruxes. I can't imagine someone walking into this, or like I mentioned, Avengers Endgame, and being like, wait, what? Who are these people? What? Why is that raccoon carrying a gun? Like, what's happening? Like, there is no explanation whatsoever. And I think that just is kind of a testament to how much story they're really trying to get through.
Yeah, I should tell you, because you're starting to reference it a lot. I have not seen Endgame yet.
I know. I've seen your Facebook post where you go, I'm not going to get into details.
Don't spoil anything, because
since we're on a Marvel tangent, I think you and Mike have been slowly sort of catching up with some of the MCU.
Yeah, we just watched Captain America: Civil War. That's where we're at. We're doing it in release order.
Nice. Yeah, that's pretty. I mean, that's kind of the way that you
should do it the first time, right? Mike wanted to do it chronologically. And I'm like, no, that's the way you should do it once you've seen it all. Like, I want to see it the way other people saw it in theaters. So that's what we're doing.
And then there's a lot of jumping around narratively where they'll mention something, and then like a next movie will have a story that takes place earlier that it really kind of delves more into that character, that kind of thing. So what are you thinking? What are your thoughts so far on the MCU?
For me, they're really hit or miss. I did not like Civil War. I thought it was very slow and boring. I thought there were some good action scenes, but I was very disappointed because I heard very good things about that one. But I really liked Age of Ultron. I think James Spader is like perfect for a villain. So I thought that was one of the really strong points about it. I love the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. The Thor movies have been getting better. I love Tom Hiddleston. He's so good. Part of it, the Captain America movies are the weakest for me.
Interesting.
And I think,
you and Kai are going to have to hash this out, because she's all about Captain America.
Well, part of it is I think Chris Evans is a really bad actor.
Okay.
And I just
Shots
think
fired.
I think you know what? I think he is a gorgeous man.
Yeah.
I think he seems like such a swell person in real life.
He does. That helps. I think that's a big part of it.
He seems like a Captain America in life. Like, I know why he got the part. I feel like he walked into the room and casting was like, just chatting with him was like, this man is all American Captain America. But then he picks up a script and becomes like as wooden as a tree. So I love Groot. Groot is amazing. Freaking Groot. Oh, my heart. The Captain America movies just tend to go really slowly for me and I think it's because the lead is not captivating enough. I like the Iron Man movies. I've already seen Black Panther. Love that movie. Doctor Strange is next in our order, and we are going to rewatch it because it was a while ago that we saw it, but I loved that when we saw it. Yeah, I'm excited to see Spider-Man because I liked, what's his name?
Tom Holland.
Tom Holland. I liked the little bit I saw of him in Civil War. Ant-Man was really bad, which was surprising to me because I love Paul Rudd so much.
I actually prefer the sequel of Ant-Man.
Oh, yeah?
So
okay,
maybe you'll like that a little better.
Okay, I hope so. Even though I think Evangeline Lilly is a terrible actor, so I'm not looking forward to seeing more of her. Yeah. So yeah, it's been very up and down for me. But I'm trying to look at it like it's a TV show, and when you watch a TV show, sometimes there are filler episodes that just aren't as good.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the perspective I'm taking. So yeah,
and this is the perfect time to catch up on those too, because of the pandemic, there's nothing.
Yeah.
There hasn't been anything this year, so you have until whenever Black Widow comes out to catch up.
Yeah, exactly. No, and that'll be cool to see in the theaters if movie theaters are still a thing.
Yeah, I know.
I can't. I hate it.
I don't like this. Back to Harry Potter.
Yeah.
So yes, but we mentioned, I feel like Lord of the Rings came up at some point. The locket felt very like that's 100% the One Ring.
Yeah.
And it was sort of astonishing how much she who must not be named basically ripped that from Lord of the Rings. So like, I could use that in Harry Potter because it's exactly the same. It's just a locket instead of a ring on a chain. But
it is.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I don't want to interrupt you. You go.
I was going to say, but I love what it leads to for these characters and what it uncovers within that main trio. Because there's obviously all these simmering issues, mostly on Ron's side, that really need to be brought to the surface and dealt with before they can move forward. Yeah,
I agree. And because it's great because we see so much of that in Ron coming up throughout the books. He constantly feels like he's in Harry's shadow, like he can never measure up, and so of course he feels like Hermione and Harry are probably into each other. We see so many of his insecurities throughout the whole series. So I think it's really important for us to see that kind of really come to a head. I think though, that's kind of where he finds some closure and kind of realizes that, he's just being his own worst enemy. There was another point I was going to make and I'm blanking. So, yeah.
Yeah, I totally understand why Ron would feel that way. Kai and I on our Half-Blood Prince conversation, we're just like, why does she like him? Like the discrepancy between how awesome Hermione is, how awesome Harry is, and then Ron's kind of there screaming about spiders usually. It's just like, what's going on?
Screaming about spiders.
One of these things is not like the other.
That's what I was going to say. Well, I remember JK saying at some point that she regretted having Ron and Hermione end up together because their relationship is so toxic, and that she would have had Hermione and Harry end up together. And I was thinking about that watching the movie, and I just feel like it would have felt a little more trite. Like Harry gets everything, and then what does Ron get? Like, exactly. You know what I mean? It just seemed like Harry shouldn't get the girl too, I guess, And so I kind of understand why she did that. And maybe that whole experience, sometimes like maybe they both matured and they're not toxic anymore. I don't know.
I hope so. She even says in this movie about, I thought Harry says to her at one point, I think she says, I thought you were mad at him. And she's like, I'm always mad at him. I'm like, well, that doesn't sound like a good foundation for a relationship.
But maybe it's all just sexual tension. And once they knock boots, they get along really great.
maybe. And that's why in the next one, after the Chamber of Secrets has like that explosion of water when they destroy the Horcrux and they kiss, they're just like, oh, okay, everything fell into place.
Right? Yeah.
We're ready. We know as soon as this is over, we're going to get a room somewhere in Hogwarts and get it over with and make it happen. But yes, it's, and I think part of it is too Emma Watson, who is a great actress in this movie. And I think since then has proven that she is one of the better of the young actors in this film or in this series. She just has much better chemistry with Daniel Radcliffe too.
She does have better chemistry with him. I was noticing that as well. However, I I think she's the weakest actor of the three of them.
Really?
Personally, I do.
Interesting.
I think Rupert Grint, is that his name? I think he is the strongest, actually, which was interesting because he went through a phase where he was the weakest, but in these last two films, he's really, really good. And I've watched Sick Note too. Have you watched that?
I have not.
It's an English show, and he's the lead on it. It's like a dark comedy, and he's really great on it. He's really good. And where I think she to me is kind of like Kristen Stewart. She always has the same like constipated look on her face. And anytime she ever has a laugh line, she messes it up. It's like it falls flat. She doesn't know how to play a comedy line at all. Where I think the other two are a little more versatile, and that's the biggest thing. It's not that she can't connect, like, you know, she has some really nice vulnerable moments.
She doesn't have as much range, I think, is what you're getting
exactly
at. Yeah.
Yes, she doesn't have. She can be authentic, but it's in a much smaller space than the other two, I feel. But I also think art is subjective, so
right, yeah.
You know, yeah.
I think it's just also. I think I'm also blinded by how interesting I find the character of Hermione.
Oh, I love the character.
her strength in this franchise, and the fact that she, you know, it's not Hermione Granger and the Deathly Hallows, but it might as well be, because I feel like a lot of times she is kind of almost leading the group until the end, where Harry's the hero and has to face Voldemort or one of his lackeys. But you know, we get that great scene here after Ron takes off, where this feels like the most indie of the Harry Potter films in a lot of ways. There's all these landscape shots. It's clearly shot outdoors, not on a green screen. And we get that scene where the two of them are dancing, and
I love that scene.
That light, like a kind of a light moment to keep them from both losing their minds. And I feel like a lesser film, like on one hand, I kind of almost ship Harry and Hermione, but I also like that it's a platonic male-female friendship in one of these films. I don't know. What do you make of that moment? And the fact that most stories probably would have had them at least kiss in that scene.
Yeah, well, I guess I know. I always felt like they were trying to establish them as having more of a brother and sister relationship. But there is one moment at the very beginning of that dance scene where I was like, oh, that's so weird. Where he takes the locket off of her, and he like does it in this very serious way. He doesn't say anything. He just comes like right up to her face and takes the locket off.
Yeah,
and to me, it's very intimate.
Gets a little sweaty when that scene plays.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, are you guys like brother and sister? What is happening? Right. And then they start dancing, and then to me, it feels very platonic. But there's that one locket moment where I'm like, ooh, what's gonna happen? So I don't know. It's so unclear to me. Like if I were the director, I would have been like, we need to retake that. This is coming across as a little too sensual and romantic. I need you to take off that locket with less intensity, or with it, try playing a different intention. Because I'm not sure what they're trying to say with that moment. If they want us to think they're going to kiss and to let us know, like if they were going to kiss, if that was what their relationship was, that's the moment where it would have happened. So is that their 100%. Way of telling us like, this is never going to happen because this is when it would have, or was it just, I mean, I guess I have to believe that was it. Cause I can't imagine a director making an oversight like that.
Right. Yeah. I think that might be it. I think Ron is clearly picking up on the chemistry between the two of them and isn't sure exactly what the relationship is, kind of like we aren't. And then when that plays out, it's the viewers knowing, okay, this is not if they were going to hook up, this would have been their opportunity. But Ron has to sort of clear that in his head, because when he destroys the locket, we get that vision of Harry and Hermione nude, embracing. I know. It's just like, I remember reading when the movie came out, how, Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson were like, that was so weird because we've grown up together and now we're like in essentially a love scene in this children's movie, sort of. I
was thinking that when I rewatched it, I was like, oh, I did not remember that they were nude. This is weird. Right. But it's dark. I love it. They go there.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's Ron's worst fear, is that the woman he loves and his best friend are going to betray him in that way. Even though he's not in a relationship with Hermione, he kind of is a little bit with Half-Blood Prince. They're sort of, he calls out for Hermione instead of Lavender Brown when he's injured there. And it's sort of the reveal to Hermione that, Ron does feel the same way. We just have to get to the point where we're admitting that to each other.
Right. Well, and there's one moment in this film that I caught that I really like. I don't remember which scene it is, but they're sleeping and one of them is on the bed and the other's sleeping on the floor. I think Hermione's in the bed and Ron is sleeping on the floor, and their arms are extended towards each other. And to me, it implied that when the lights went off, they were holding hands and they fell asleep holding hands and had like let go in their sleep.
Yeah.
So like, obviously, they were already there. I think in this film, they were seeing each other as some kind of more than platonic relationship. If they're holding hands in the dark, they're just trying to keep it secret. But Ron might think, is this a friends with benefits kind of thing? Or am I her boyfriend? Like, what is this? Is she into Harry? Like, because they're both too fearful to actually have a real conversation about it and set up some parameters.
Well, they're also on a Horcrux hunting spree, so it's not.
Seems like it's like
there's. Yeah. It's like they're both sort of unspoken. Like there's clearly something here, but they haven't sat down and had the talk and updated their Facebook relationship status or whatever. But yes,
their wand book.
Exactly. They haven't gotten to that point yet, but I do love the way that the films sort of play that out and tease it in the earlier installments, that they sort of have like a crush on each other, and then it kind of blossoms in these last two films. So I think that's sweet. I just question the long-term viability of that relationship, but whatever. I feel like we're getting closer to the end here, but I want to talk about the Tale of Three Brothers and that animated sequence.
Yes, that is again, my favorite thing about this film, actually.
Again, sort of like Kill Bill, which has a random animated sequence. So does Harry Potter here. So why is it your favorite thing about this film?
I love fairy tales and fables. I don't have it anymore. I gave it to my younger sister because she also loves fairy tales and fables. But I used to have this complete anthology of all the original Grimm's fairy tales. And, I'm sure as you probably know, they're like super dark and violent and creepy. And I love that. So I like that there, we get some insight into wizardry fairy tales. And I love the shadow. I love the shadow animation. I just think it's really cool. And I actually, what it reminds me of, and then it made me think of some other parallels, is it reminds me of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which I'm a huge fan of, as you know, because I was like, oh yeah, and there's like a chosen one and there's a prophecy and that's similar too. But it reminds me of, in the last season of Buffy, you find out, the origin of the Slayer, and they kind of find out via this little shadow lantern thing. And that's kind of what the animation reminded me of, were these like moving shadows, almost like shadow puppets, like hands, I mean, not to that degree, but I just thought that was a really creative and visually appealing way of telling that story, of bringing it to life. Because it was brought to life, but it was in shadows, so it wasn't fully alive. I mean, that was so much more interesting than if they had done some kind of live action flashback of people 100%. We didn't know or recognize. It just felt so much more like eerie lore, like a ghost story around a campfire.
Right? Yeah, it's ethereal, and the whole point is that the characters they don't know that the Deathly Hallows actually exist. The whole point is this is a made-up story, and is this real? Do they really exist? Well, we know the invisibility cloak exists from the first movie, but but the Resurrection Stone doesn't come in until way late in the second part, and the Elder Wand obviously is kind of the cliffhanger hinges on. So it's also plays into the fact of the myth of the Deathly Hallows and how it's not traditionally held as fact. And if they had showed us live action footage, that would have kind of tipped that reveal a little sooner than
True.
I think is willing to go
Good
for.
Good point. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think it's probably it's definitely one of the standout sequences of this movie, but it's also kind of with the Snape montage in the next one as like these like perfect standalone pieces of filmmaking within this franchise that you can just pull out and be like, look at this as a piece. It sort of works almost as a short film on its own.
Yeah.
And I love that about it. And I love the idea of the Deathly Hallows and the symbol when you combine the three. And that sometimes I'm driving around and I'll see a decal on the back of somebody's car. And I'm like, hey, that's the Deathly Hallows. Like it's become an icon for the franchise.
It's true, but it's kind of creepy, weird because have you watched this docuseries that's on HBO called The Vow?
I have not.
It's a true crime docuseries, and have you heard of Keith Raniere or the Nexium cult?
Mm-mm.
Okay,
No.
well, it's been like in the news a lot lately because they actually just sentenced Keith Raniere, who was the head of this cult. But anyway, it was a sex trafficking cult. It's super complicated. The docuseries is fascinating. But one of the big scandals / crimes of it was they were branding women with this symbol that it turns out was made up of the cult leader and another leader's initials, but they formulated it in a way to look like this weird symbol.
Right.
And so when I was watching this movie, I was like, oh, the Deathly Hallows symbol now looks like the Keith Raniere cult symbol.
Oh, geez.
To me, they actually look
That's
kind of
creepy.
similar because there's like a triangle and like a round arc. So it kind of looks like that now. So yeah, I'm like seeing the Deathly Hallows symbol I guess I'm seeing the cult symbol in that. But
Right.
it's such a pop culture reference. It's such an identifiable image now.
Right.
That you can even see it in cult symbols.
Apparently. Good job, JK. Look at all your inspiring people. But yeah, so it's a really cool story and worthy of being the kind of titular mystery of the story. I wanted to talk about before we get kind of start wrapping things up, we have to talk about Dobby, who shows up sort of midway through briefly with Creature and kind of aids them in their mission, and then of course comes through and as he says, he'll always be there for Harry Potter, shows up at the Malfoy Manor to help them all escape. And Dobby, after completely being a boss and facing down Bellatrix Lestrange, does suffer a mortal wound. And I'm assuming you still cry whenever you see this because it's heart-wrenching.
Every time I cry.
The ultimate innocent in this franchise too. I think that's why, like, it would be like, well, I mean, going back to the Marvel thing, it's like when they killed Groot at the end of Guardians. It's just like this guy, the sweetest one who, he'll kill people with his like tree limbs, but it's all, he's like so good natured and has this like light about him that Dobby, even in Chamber of Secrets where he's doing crazy things and kind of sabotaging Harry Potter's life, it's all in the service of protecting him.
Yes. Yeah. He has such good intentions.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what makes his death so tragic is even like, he's even being positive in his own death. Like he's talking about how beautiful everything looks and that he's so happy to be with his friends. Like, it's just like, it's so heartbreaking. And for that to happen right after he has this moment of closure and empowerment, standing up against his former owners, the people that enslaved him, that he not only stands up against them, but that by doing so, he saves the life of his friend, of the person who got him his freedom. Like, and then he dies right after that. It's like, it's so heart-wrenching. His tiny little body. Oh, and it's just so awful the way his tiny little body's in Harry's lap. And he's just like in shock. Like, oh my gosh, it's so awful.
Yeah, it's very upsetting.
So
I feel bad for the parents that took their kids to see this one and then had to pay for all the therapy afterwards.
I know. I mean, it's weird, and maybe it's because of my love of tragedy, but I never remember that it ends with that cliffhanger with Voldemort and the wand. I always think it ends with Harry burying Dobby, and Dobby's death is the end of that movie, because I guess his death like feels like such an ending to me.
Right.
But it makes sense that the wand, I think it makes so much more sense to have it end on this cliffhanger, to remind us of like, oh, right, this is the thing that we're fighting. This is the thing that we're worried about. And it's happening. Like, he's playing a move that's going to give him a lot of power,
Right.
But Dobby's death, it gets you. Oh.
Yeah, that was actually my last question was going to be about if that's the best cutoff point, Voldemort and the Elder Wand. And I think we sort of landed on why it works. You get the emotional impact with Dobby's death. And then while you're wiping your tears, you get like sort of the button at the end of the story being like, oh, and he's got the Elder Wand. Get ready for some shit next year when we come back with part 2. So yeah, I think it works. My only thing that's frustrating is that then the next one doesn't have, like I said, the next one is just it's just go, go, go. Like you don't get a moment to breathe in the next one. Like like I said, I watched it last night, and it's, I think, the shortest of all of them, because it's just nothing but climax. And it's just, it's just, they go into Gringotts and they escape from then. And then the Battle of Hogwarts starts not even halfway through, I think. And it's just continues until the end of the movie. And it's crazy that they were able to kind of have a whole movie of just, the Battle of Hogwarts taking up so much of the last film. But I think that's why it's so important that this movie has that character focus and those moments like Harry and Hermione dancing in the forest, and where you could be like, okay, these characters, they're experiencing this, they're doing the best they can, they're facing this kind of nearly insurmountable evil, but they're just people doing the best they can, and then in the next one it's just they're on. It's just we don't have time for that crap. So is there anything about Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1 that we didn't talk about that you wanted to make sure we mentioned?
This is really small, but one thing that bugged me rewatching it is when Hermione hits Harry with that spell to make his face swell up as a disguise when they're kidnapped at the end or towards the end. I'm like, why did nobody look at his forehead to see if he had a scar? Like, even when they're asking like Draco if he knows who he is, and he's like, I don't know. Like, I was thinking like, he's got a super identifiable scar on his forehead. Like, why would that not be the first thing they would look for? So that I was like,
is it as visible though? I feel like when his head kind of swells up, that it's harder to discern that maybe.
We need to see them then pick up his hair and look and be like, oh, I can't tell, his forehead's all swollen.
Right, yeah.
Like, I need that detail. Like, I mean,
it's also kind of
things bug me.
It's also kind of dumb that you pick up a kid who looks like, similar body size of Harry, glasses, dark hair, hanging out with Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger. I mean,
right?
It's a pretty good odds, just saying.
Right. So that like it especially bothers me. That stuff almost doesn't bother me as much in material that's not as well written. But because there's so many well thought out details in this franchise, when then something is like that, I'm like, what the hell? Come on. Like, you're supposed to do better.
Right.
So
exactly.
So that's the only thing.
Yeah. It's like, come on, J.K. Rowling. We used to expect better of you.
Yeah. Right. Take, maybe you're focusing too much of your energy on, hating people, and you need to instead be better at writing your books.
Yeah. Go back and read your own books, and the magical protection that the love of a mother for her son. And that's the basis for the entire thing.
I know.
It's like, take yourself back to school, I guess. But so if there's nothing else, Lyndsey Cole, can you tell people where they can find you on social media again?
Yeah. My Insta handle is Lyndsey with a Y not.
I love that username, by the way.
Oh, thank you. It's LYNDSEY with a Y, and I think it's underscore, not. But my name is Lyndsey Cole, LYNDSEYCOLE. And like I said, you can check out my acting website too. You can look me up on YouTube if you want to see any of my stuff. Be friends with me on Instagram. I'd love to meet you. Yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you for having me on, Rob. This was super fun. I love.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. You're welcome anytime. And
thank you.
And definitely keep me posted on your MCU experience, because I'm really curious. Now Civil War is the beginning of Phase 3, which is the one that just ended with Spider-Man Far From Home. So I'm curious to see where the rest of it, how the rest of it plays out for you.
Okay, well, as you've noticed, I'm very opinionated, so I will let you know what I think.
Awesome. Thanks,
Cool.
Lyndsey.
Thank you.
If you're interested in joining me on the show to chat about one of your favorite films, head on over to crookedtable.com/guest. Or you can consider supporting the show at patreon.com/crookedtable. Of course, you can always find more podcasts, reviews, videos, and other movie-related goodies over at crookedtable.com. Until next time, this has been the Crooked Table Podcast, and I've been Rob.
This has been a production of crookedtable.com. All rights reserved.
CROOKED.